Hi, I'm Juraika.
And I'm El Ninja Cupcake.
And it's me, Jay, your DM, and this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom. As usual, we are gathered here around this digital table so that we may regale you all with, snippets of our wisdom, things that we love, and just generally to talk about this game that we admire so much, Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop experiences in general.
It is time for Dungeon Crawl.
Dungeon Crawl. My Dungeon Crawl is obvious this week. I'm gonna just snatch it off the table and get rid of it because it's pretty simple. We've got the Tome of Foes. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is coming out.
I've heard it's Mordenkainen.
Listen, maybe.
I mean, that's what both Mike Merles and Todd Kenrick said, so.
Morty Cordy's
all right.
Tome of Toes is coming out, and we're about to be just in an absolute deluge of high-level monsters. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna have so many ways to kill you guys.
Yay.
So then, I feel like it's gonna be harder for you to restrain yourself. And that makes me feel okay.
Nobody feed him after midnight.
It's true. I turn into a gremlin. I was born a goblin, but I can turn into a gremlin.
Whoa.
Skills.
The Tome of Foes, we've already gained a tremendous amount of information about it. We know that there's going to be some new player races, the Sea Elves.
I think you're overstating it slightly.
What do you mean?
I don't know. We know some things.
Well, I watched the Dragon Talk.
Oh, they probably had some. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they discussed a lot of things. So they discussed about the Blood War. They discussed about the Githyanki and the Githzerai being in there. They discussed about the Sea Elves and the Eladrin being in there. They discussed about how it's about the conflicts between Drow and elves and the history of the elves, and it goes into the conflicts between the Dwagar and the dwarves, and then it also goes into the non-conflict surrounding halflings and gnomes. So it actually goes into quite a bit, and we've already kind of learned a lot about what it's going to generally cover. Obviously, the actual monsters that are in the book have not been talked much about yet, but we can imagine that there's going to be some variation on Giths as monsters, and Shadowfell beasts have been talked about. They talked about the Shadar Kai, which are these Shadowfell elves. The Shadar Kai were so interesting to them that they end up going back and adding in some Shadowfell monsters as well. So they've really fleshed out a lot of the locales, both planar and extraplanar, and added a ton of new monsters, especially high-level ones. Half the monsters in the book are CR 10 and above. So these are going to be tough monsters.
Yes.
So anyway, I'm just really excited. I always love new monsters, and I'm excited and enticed by the prospect of leaving the prime material plane and getting into some extra planar adventures. And now I have enough material, I feel like, that I could actually work with those extra planar locales. All right, so Juraika, what have you got on your dungeon crawl today?
Well, the past 3 weeks have been the return of Craft Hags. The lovely Danny Hartel has been putting together her original character design Scrummy into a really gross, disgusting, and beautiful costume that she hopes to wear. Scrummy is a gnome warlock who lives with Myconids, so there's a lot of room for storytelling through outfits, and I really like that sort of storytelling where you don't state it outright, but you can see Danny Hartel's second episode is distressing foot coverings and talking about how she's gonna gross everything up. And I love it because that's gonna give some depth and some wear and some obvious use, and it's gonna say more about the character than I think anything else.
Yeah, it just tells a story. I mean, see, she's been through some stuff. Danny Hartel has such an amazing brain. She's got a beautiful way of looking at things.
definitely.
It's interesting to me that both her and Holly Conrad, who are both very talented costumers, are both interested in making their characters dirty, filthy, kind of mucked up and disgusting. It says a lot about the way that adds dimension to costumes and the way that you must think when you're a costumer. For them, adding filth and grime is a step, because when you make the clothes, they're always clean as a costumer. So it's when you're adding that filth and grime and that distressing of the materials that you're really telling a story through the materials. So it makes sense that these people who are really into costuming wouldn't want clean cut and normal like clothes. They want these elaborate, strange materials that they've always kind of desired to work with, and this very unique look that they think that they can achieve. And really their costuming is becoming a way of, their character design is becoming a way of challenging themselves in costuming as well. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's really
But
cool.
at the same time, I mean, these women are amazing. Danny Hartel's character from Dice Camera Action was Zendala, who came across a little high and mighty to me. And not just because her outfit when Danny made it was gorgeous, but also, you know, the bearing and the pictures that Danny took and things like that. And Alba from Dragons in Places is probably the cutest tiefling druid I've ever seen. Could have some filth. It's not clear, but Strix definitely takes it down to Filth Town. But I think that the range that D&D lets you have with the grime spectrum is large.
Cupcake, you also had something that you wanted to talk about today.
I did. I am obviously a big C-Team fan, and this last week of the C-Team did not disappoint. I got one word for you guys. Oak-splosion. It was priceless.
I've never been more happy to watch a man explode.
Right? I may have gotten so excited when this happened that I frightened my cats.
What did your birds do?
They were just as excited, believe it or not. There was lots of screaming going on. There was a couple like laser guns going off.
Nice.
But it was
Every
great.
good death scene needs a laser gun.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not see that coming.
I want to say that there was probably a way that the C-Team could have saved him if they had been more expedient in their attempts. I think that Jerry was picking up on a very, like, lackadaisical attitude towards the rescue of this figure. And so he was just like, well, you know, if they're not going to really try to save him, so sure, I'll just shatter him.
That would be a really good question for him to find out if that's the way his brain was working. Or if he was just dead set on actually killing a character. Because is that the first time we've seen, like, a main character die?
I can't recall a time where a character, besides Devine, has died like that.
But she came back.
But no, she came back as a corpse filled with rats.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. And then she died again. I think, you know, it's honestly interesting because he did describe very, very clearly the ice crystal in which Oak was captured within being very difficult to extract Oak from. Like, he said several times, like, it would be very hard and very dangerous for Oak to extract him from the crystal.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he intended to allow Oak to be freed.
And also, Cathris prioritized talking to the party about saving Oak over approaching the and figuring out what the wanted. So I think that was definitely a big step towards showing that the party wanted to save Oak.
Right.
There was never a moment where they were just like, I rush over and grab Oak. He's sliding across this ice. Like, I rush over and grab him, and I start moving him towards our boat.
It's true.
I personally love the whole, like, crystal thinking about the way this would actually look.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see, I guess I don't think I could fan art and do that justice, but I would love to see how somebody would do that. And let me throw out there the cipher that he gave to the guys.
Oh, that was so cool.
So freaking rad. And I was watching it live, and the chat had that in 2-3 minutes.
It was crazy.
It was amazing.
They worked out the Shift 23, which is a pretty common online cipher. It's used mostly in message boards for hiding spoilers. So you shift 23 your code, and then you post the spoiler up, and then if you want to uncode the spoiler, you go back in and shift reverse 23 it, and then you just put it in the decoder, and it'll decode it for you. So it's a pretty common online code, but to actually just sit down and look at a piece of paper and work that out while playing a game of D&D, while being streamed...
Right.
Like, while also trying to be entertaining and engaging, it's just a crazy feat that they pulled off. And it really took teamwork. Like, Amy basically took on the bulk of the scene, actually still role-playing and keeping engaged with Jerry, while the others took a moment to sort of work out the puzzle.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it was it the players that figured it out, or was it actually the fans?
The fans figured it out first, and then the players at the table figured it out on their own as well.
Gotcha.
I would love to do something like that to rhymes in a game.
Oh, absolutely. As soon as I saw that, I began to think about how can I incorporate puzzles like this into future games? How can I make something like this an aspect of games that I can play? And really, you know you're DMing right when people in the audience start thinking like, I want to do this in my game. Like,
sure.
If you can inspire that emotion, then you have done something incredibly right. And C-Team did it. I mean, that was a really cool puzzle. It was a really cool scene. It was a really cool episode.
It was a cool thing to, like, throw out to your audience to give them something to do to be involved in the game, too.
Mm-hmm. And he even said that. This was for the Shadow Council. This wasn't for you guys. And then they're like, well, why didn't you tell us? And he's like, because you were having fun.
Yes, yeah. I love the moment when, like, Chris and Ryan looked at each other across the table and like, no, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
All right, guys. Sometimes we answer questions, and now is one of those times. First question submitted by Earth Day Yeti on D&D DM Academy. What do rookie homebrew campaigns forget to do? I'm assembling my own homebrew campaign for my group. What do you think are the most commonly forgotten, left out, neglected elements of a good homebrew campaign? What basic things should I make sure I do or don't do to help make my campaign as engaging and entertaining as possible? I think that when you're making a homebrew world, it's very easy to get caught up in your story and your narrative and forget the players. You have to have player buy-in, and you have to incorporate player stories and player elements. If your homebrew campaign is a fully fleshed out and realized world in which your players are merely voyeurs watching these incredible clockwork machinations you've set up spin around them, then they're not going to feel at all connected or attached to it. This goes back into the stuff I was saying last week in that game, where I was saying that players' backstories are their only buy-in into the game, the only thing that they get to bring into your world. So I think that the most commonly forgotten thing by homebrew creators is that they aren't concerning themselves enough with their players and their player stories. You got to make sure that you honor that story and that you incorporate those elements into your world. Otherwise, you've just created, you know, a very great novel for yourself to read that your players are kind of like being forced to walk through. But in order to make it their world or your shared world with them, they have to have a place there that's their own.
Yeah, it's as much of a story as it is a discussion and a relationship, and that's a two-way street.
Absolutely. They have to be able to impact the world, they have to be able to make changes, and their presence has to matter.
Because we all like to matter. I like random creatures, like critters and little tiny details that they build on each other. You have that little bit of... This is a really bad analogy. When you're doing home design, you have little details that kind of blend in from one room to another. So it kind of all carries in and ties into each other.
Oh, I understand that. You got to have those connecting elements, but they don't necessarily have to be, like, important to the plot. The fact that they're not important to the plot can make the world actually feel more real.
Right, but then they could be important to the plot later when they think that they're not important to the plot.
Right. It can be like how airships work in this world is through some giant purple crystal on the back of them. And every time they go into a city, there's a giant purple crystal on the back of some ship that's flying around. And it's like, oh, that's not at all relevant to the adventure that we're having. But the fact that he keeps describing this consistently throughout the whole time makes it feel like it's a real consistent world.
Yeah.
And then when
it's
you
those
get to
little
the
details.
level where the crystals come from, maybe like a crystal landscape of some sort, you're like, oh... He was
exactly
planning it the whole time.
Right?
When
right,
he might not
yeah.
have been.
I totally get that, though. Those little details can make or break a world, make it feel real or not. I once heard somebody explain how things that fantasy authors often forget to include in their fantasy worlds. Sports. How do people get news in their world?
Oh.
How do people get mail in that world? Like, if you don't include little details like that, then the world doesn't feel as deep. But if you do include those little bitty things, like, oh yeah, this whole group was watching this dinosaur races last week in Cholt. Suddenly, the dinosaur races make Cholt feel more like a real place. Because it's like, oh wow, they have something that they do for fun. This has nothing to do with survival. This is just a thing that these people in this area do for fun. And it makes sense.
So you add in, like, real life aspects, but make them a little more fantastical.
Exactly. Maybe they have a crystal ball in their house that lights up and then expels some sort of message onto the counter every morning. That's how they get their mail. You never know. Or maybe they have something sort of like owl riders who ride between cities on these giant owls and drop off messenger bags full of news, like we just had in the crystal city of Carador. Mm-hmm. These messengers are not necessarily anything that's important to the plot, but the fact that they exist makes it feel like a real city.
For sure.
Jarika, do you have anything that you think on this? Or?
Queer and out and proud people.
That is very fair. A diversity of experience and groups makes a world feel more real.
I'm aspirational with my D&D, and therefore I hope for a world in which we can coexist. And so I would want to model that.
I think in a world where humans are banging elves, dudes banging each other becomes less of a concern. It's like, oh wow, there are like races everywhere and they can all intermingle and create different forms of creature. And it's like, all right, we got bigger things on our mind. You know, we have dire elephants to worry about. We can't be worried about what this dude's doing at night. From DM Academy again, we have Red Sun Superman. Telling us, handling players looting dead PCs in a homebrew D&D system where player deaths are frequent. I am sure there are other posts of people asking how to handle players looting dead PCs. In the game I'm working on, players expect to die more often than regular D&D, and I'm even making them multiple character sheets so they can sub in a new character in a session if their primary character dies. Oh. The point of this is to make the game more tense and challenging while still ensuring players don't sit out. I was thinking of also setting the expectation that it's a fair game for other PCs to steal your stuff if you die, but I'm worried that even if I set that expectation beforehand, it'll create too much tension between players, as I still want them to feel like a team. You can't really have a team where the team members are constantly changing out.
Yeah, it seems very PvP.
The team isn't changing out necessarily because the team is the players. The characters are changing out.
Yeah, it seems like you need to bring extra character sheets and some Valium to this game. I think this would terrify me, and if I was going to steal something off of a player, I would make it something absolutely ridiculous. So, like, I'm only gonna steal your underwear and left shoe.
You're creating a very strange scenario when you allow players to be swapped out that much. So, I'm playing Tomb of Annihilation right now, and Tomb of Annihilation comes with the expectation that characters will die more often than other adventures. There are a lot of very dangerous things in the jungles of Cholt. I've had 3 characters die in my adventure so far, in a party of 5 individuals. All 3 have been the same player. So this player has had to change characters very frequently. But even then, because it's only one person changing out a character, the rest of the group has still managed to forge pretty decent bonds with each other. And I've always managed to work in the other player with some interesting angle each time he creates a new character, so he still feels connected to the group. But I think it would be very hard to run a game where people felt like a team if the team members were constantly changing out. You would need a very specific scenario for them. It would be incredibly difficult to feel connected to anyone if you've known them for one session, and then you're likely to die next session, or they're likely to die next session, and the constant churn of dead really makes character introductions pointless. Yeah, I think that would get very challenging. To answer the question, as far as a homebrew system for looting dead players, I think roll initiative, and then, let each person take a thing on their initiative roll, and you can kind of go through their items that way. I don't know that this is a system that I would incorporate, though.
I think it would require a very specific group of people.
Mm-hmm. It would take a very open-minded group and a very specific kind of campaign. Maybe something like a gladiator's pit, where you're constantly introducing new combatants to this gladiatorial arena, or a force of elite military soldiers, and like it's expected you're going on these high-level missions, these highly risky missions, that some of you are gonna die, but you're all connected to like your country and the cause. At least then you have some buy-in that can build over time and become more complex, because even if the characters are dying, you as a player are learning more about the country, the cause, and the secret motivations of the leaders. Something like that could
Hear
work.
me out. A Voltron situation.
Oh,
But
I like it. I'll form the head.
But the thing that is consistent is the lion part. So each player is sort of like a faction in and of themselves. So let's say like I'm player left leg. All of my characters that come in form the left leg. And that's the consistent part, and maybe because of that, they all have to be, like, their highest stat has to be, like, charisma or something. And this is getting really specific, but perhaps they're, like, some sort of guardians of a golem of some kind, and they have to make sure all of the bits get to where they need to go, and if somebody dies, somebody new has to come in and make sure the bit gets to where it's going. Like, I could see this.
Absolutely, and that can be anything. They could have like 5 different gyms.
Can't lose the gem. That would be bad.
Yeah, you can do something like that, absolutely. But like you're saying, and like I think we've said, it has to be a very specific circumstance to make this work, and this is a dangerous road to tread, my DM friend. Be careful where you walk, lest you step upon a landmine.
Of emotion, of human emotion.
It sounds really great, like this meat grinder, like, oh, we're gonna go into this dungeon and like, you're gonna die every session. Somebody's gonna die. Can you handle this hardcore? But then in the actual doing of it, it's just like, oh, well, fuck, I just died again. Great, let me pull out Wrathgar 3. Here's Wrathgar 3.
And then I feel like you're gonna get sloppy with your character creation, and you're not gonna fill it out as much as you would. You know, I've definitely had some characters that I felt I connected with better, even though that I made all these characters. There's characters that I can imagine more fully and that I can embody better, and there's characters that I can't because the common ground is not there. So I'm sure after you've made your 5th or 6th one, you're like, I don't care about Jimmy, like, fuck him.
Yeah, and that's very much a problem I had with my character who's died 4 times, or he's died twice. He changed character once. He's on his 4th character. But that was because he changed character. He died the first time. He made a second character just very quickly on the fly. And then he didn't enjoy that character. Like, he didn't have any connection to him. He didn't have any motivation for that character. So I ended up explaining a reason for that character to leave so that I could get him a new character that he was more invested in, and then that character died. And so now he's making another new character that I've helped him kind of flesh out a bit again. But it is proving to be a bit of a challenge. How do I keep this player invested in each of these characters? How do I get him to spend the time necessary to flesh out a character before playing it if he knows that this is his 4th character? There's probably going to be a 5th before it's all over. Tomb of Annihilation is definitely teaching me some things about DMing. I like when characters die, but I like when it's like one time and it's not like every 3rd session.
Here's a question for you. How much of your characters' backstories have you been able to tie in with Tomb of Annihilation?
Virtually none.
Yeah. The most recent campaign I was in as a player, that was the one that I switched out because it's more of that sort of feeling where it's a story that the DM is telling, which is fine. I don't mind it. But it could be something like that where what she just said, you don't tie in the backstory of the characters and give them some buy-in and ability to affect the world concurrently with yourself. That might be why some of the character churning happens, because they're looking for something in the story and they're not finding it, so they're trying to move on to something that might work.
If I could go back to the beginning of Tomb of Annihilation, I would definitely do a few things differently. I think that there's some choices I could have altered to make player engagement a little higher. Anyway.
But the most important question is, who dies today?
Prepare to be
annihilated!
First time DM. Where do I focus in a homebrew campaign? As the title stated, I'm a first time DM. I'm going to DM for a group of 4 people, of which 3 are almost, if not entirely, new to D&D. I'm most experienced, which is why I've been promoted to D&D. I've decided to start from a homebrew campaign setting with 2 of the 4 people already running Lost Mine of Phandelver with another group, so that's not an option anymore. So he can't run Lost Mine of Phandelver anymore because they've already run it. I'm fairly creative, so I don't think the homebrewing in itself is a problem. Our session 0 is Sunday, and I want to present the players with a general feel of the homebrew world so they can come up with a backstory that also fits the world. Our campaign is hopefully going to have a nice balance between battles and RP. I just don't know what to focus on with the homebrew stuff. There's so much to think about. The country, political system, underlying tensions, social structures, etc. I was thinking all these things are okay for general feel, but I think level 1 characters in general aren't really impacted by these things, but I feel like I can't fill in the small things without knowing the bigger picture. My players have put their faith in me and I don't want to let them down. Okay, so this is a lot. My general advice for a first-time DM is don't homebrew. It's a lot, like you're currently feeling. Yeah. It's a lot of pressure. If you're a first-time DM, I would recommend finding one of the many other adventures that D&D currently provides and running those. You're dead set on running a homebrew campaign. Where do you focus first? We discussed this last time a little bit, but start with small and then build up. Start with the town that they're in. Flesh out the town that they're in. Figure out the governing system for the country they're in. And figure out what the main tension of your campaign is. If you can answer those 3 questions confidently, then you should be able to work through anything that comes up in the session. So if you know, like, who rules the land? What's his current major problem? What's the main focus of the campaign going to be down the road? And what is this city like? In detail, what is this city like? Who runs this city? Who are the important figures in the city?
It's a big, big world out there. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, you don't need to have, like, the whole world planned. Every city, every coast, every valley, every forest is named. Like, that's too much.
Right. So it's kind of, the advice is, it's like, how do you eat a cake? You start with 1 bite at a time.
Exactly.
Cake.
You just need to figure out where they are. And the smaller you can make where they are, the easier it's going to be to figure it out. Why do you think the people in Critical Role started in this little bitty outskirts city? Matthew Mercer is a great DM. He's been building this world for a long time. He's still planning out the next 3 cities. Even a great masterful DM like him does not know everybody in every city in his whole entire world. While they're in this small town doing the first adventure, he's planning out the next town and describing all the people in it. And it's the same for everybody. You can't know everything in your game right off the bat, but 1 bite at a time.
And I think that a lot of DMs too, they don't plan out absolutely everything. I mean, they get a lot of player buy-in, which gets them more invested in the game as well, and kind of takes a little bit of it off of you, right?
Your characters are going to interact. They're going to goof off, and if you give them room to do so, then they're going to fill up a lot of the session, so you don't have to.
Are you saying we table talk?
You talk. Your characters talk. You have interactions. You have, your own dynamics. Yeah, if I was to start a DM homebrew world, I would probably set it on the ocean so that you're dealing with small islands, and also you can have large periods of time where you're on a ship with a very small crew of individuals. And you can very finely control when people get places because you're in the ocean, so things take exactly as long as you say they take. Keep your setting small in those ways.
That is a very good point.
Pare it down. Don't stress about having the whole world. Nobody can do that. You're not God. You just pretend to be one on Sundays.
Lol.
Yeah, is there anything, if you're in a game, what's the expectation for you? What's the thing that you need to see in order to buy into the world?
Art.
That's a great idea, but extrapolate on that.
Well, okay, here's a little Jerica history. I was an art history minor in undergrad, and I took a lot of hours of looking at art and people telling me what it means. I have I don't know, I guess I got a soft spot for that kind of storytelling as well, where people have either made monumental pieces of art or singular pieces of art to tell their individual stories. But every culture has artists, and I feel like if you can describe a part of the culture, a part of the world with art, or even some sort of problem the society is having, I'm all for that. And that can be like a self-portrait, or that could be an obelisk that was carved from top to bottom.
And art can be, having pictures of cities, and they don't have to be like a picture of the city, but a picture that evokes the feeling of that city.
And how it evokes the feeling of the city is going to tell you a lot of things, both about what the artist was feeling or what the patron was feeling. And if the patron was a powerful somebody something, then that tells you a little bit more about the direction of the area. Anyway, yeah. I got a lot of thoughts.
And you as a DM have an infinite resource for art to bring into your world. You have Google.
Yes.
Music. Music is another way art can shape your campaign and immediately give you more veracity. If you can bring some music into the session, it's going to establish a mood. If you're playing some Mediterranean-style music, it gives you that kind of bizarre sort of feeling where you're in the middle of a marketplace and they're trading. Or if you're playing some more like Celtic music, then you get that sort of very Eastern European fantasy vibe right away. And you're getting a lot of the setting translated through, again, art.
Mm-hmm. Because it's passive, so like you can look around as players, and it's not that like a certain NPC has to be there or something like that. I mean, the art can just exist.
The fountain in Carador, at the center of Carador, the fact that they have this fountain that washes away scars tells you something about them.
Preach, girl, preach.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if you don't necessarily intend it, but having city features like that is informing your players about the city. Having the vines and trees growing up through the crystal structures is telling you something about
having Scala arranged from wider to more tight, and having the outer parts be more multinational, and having the closer parts more ethnically pure, if you will.
Right, and approaching a summit, a literal peak.
Yep.
Art, the visual aesthetic, the style of the city, the way it's segregated, those are all important factors that are going to give your players more buy-in to your homebrew world.
I think you need to incorporate, believability is a big thing. You have to be able to get in and believe about it, so you have to make it like real life. You have to have real life aspects of things and then be able to build on top of that. So, even if it's level 1 characters and their first day is they have to unload all of their stuff and get situated, how do they do that?
That's good. I like that. The mundanity of the basic acts establishes a tone and sets you up as a low-level character.
Yeah, and then they can choose to be as grouchy about it or make it as fantastical as they want.
Absolutely.
It's a good blank canvas, sort of, for the way the characters want to roleplay.
Yeah, and it lets them establish what kind of a character they want to be as well.
You're giving them a chance to kind of paint a picture that doesn't require you to actually have that much prepared. You're asking them a question, and then they're entertaining themselves and each other with the way that they answer.
The open-endedness is one of my favorite parts of a D&D campaign, is you get to interpret it and build it in your own mind.
Absolutely. And I'm learning so much about what's good for you guys in my future games. So this has been a very educational thing for me as well.
Give me a fresco, Jay. I need a fresco.
Incorporating more arts, incorporating more societal cues, and embracing the mundanity of certain acts are all interesting. Especially as you guys head into level 7 and 8. You're about to leave the low-level campaign zone. Like, you're on that borderline now where you're starting to pass into the more fantastic realm. This is the last chance to really enjoy the day-to-day mundanity of a character life.
I'm on the edge of glory, Jay.
right?
People are going to start getting tree stride and things of that nature. It's going to get wild here soon.
Oh boy.
Is Fia gonna run away? She's gonna run straight back to her elven kin, isn't she?
Who knows?
No. Oh, geez. Oh, boy.
That level 10 line, the difference between a campaign at level 9 and at level 11 is night and day.
Oh boy. Then we're going to become S-class heroes and...
Yes, there you go. Fairy tale. I've seen this anime.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this, the latest episode of Insight Check. We'd like to thank Vince Fept for our theme music, Never Stand Alone, and Amy T. Falcone for our branding and the icons we use on social media. If you would like to leave us a review on iTunes, we do have a presence there, and we also have a presence on the Twitter at Insight Check Pod. You can always hashtag Insight Check any of your D&D questions, and we will do our best to answer them.
Answering your cues from our collective A's.
This
Was...
Insight Check!
Holy shit! You just described it the best campaign ever.
Have I? I don't know if you.
I want to play this giant robot.
Oh,
I want
okay.
to be a robot guy. I want to be a Power Ranger, fantasy Power Ranger.
Totally.
Oh my word.
Jiraika, DM this game.
Well, I have some other plans.
I'll form the head.
Yeah, I think you're drunk with power.
I'm very excited about this Power Rangers D&D game you've described, and I want to be playing it right now.
Yeah.